Good afternoon, dear students. Today, our topic is devoted to the subject of IS. IS is a subject of integrated skill. All the skills should be together taught in one lesson, and therefore it is called IS lesson, like integrated skill. Today, our theme is about disaster. What is disaster itself? We can hear a lot of information about disaster which can occur around the world, but also you pay attention to the word, from which language it came out and from where you can use them. The term disaster owes its origin to the French word désastre, which is combination of two words, das meaning and bad. Bad and aster meaning is a star. If we want the full version of the translation of the meaning of this disaster means bad or evil star. A serious disruption in the functioning of the community or society causing widespread material, economic, social, or environmental losses which exceeded the ability of the affected society to cope using its own resources. Nowadays, we have a lot of types of disaster, and today in this lesson, we will learn about its features and types. What kind of features or types disaster has? Disaster is a result of from as a combination of hazard, vulnerability, insufficient capacity, or measures to reduce the potential chances of risk. A disaster happens when a hazard impacts on the vulnerable population and the causes damage and casualties and disruption. Disaster, how do we consider any hazard like flood, earthquake, cyclone, which is triggering event along with the greater vulnerability, would lead to disaster causing greater loss to life and property. Only when it affects, for example, an earthquake in uninhabited desert cannot be considered a disaster, no matter how strong the intensity produced. An earthquake is a disaster only when it affects people, their properties, and activities. Disaster occurs when the hazard and vulnerability meet, and also we should be noted that with the greater capacity of the individual, community, and environment to face these disasters, the impact of a hazard reduces. Therefore, we need to understand three major components which are called hazard, vulnerability, and capacity. One by one, we can try to explain about all of them. What is hazard? Hazard is a dangerous condition or event that treat has the potential for causing injury to life and damage the property of the environment. And let's talk about the origination of the word. Most of the word hazard owes its origin to the word hazard in Old French, and in Arabic it should be like az-zahr. The meaning is a chance and lark. Hazard can be grouped into two broad categories, which is name it like natural and man-made. What about natural hazard? Natural hazards are hazards which are caused because of natural phenomena, hazard with a meteorological, geological, or even biological. And example of a natural hazards will be or are like cyclones, tsunamis, earthquake, volcanic eruption, and another one. What about man-made hazard? From its name, we can predict that this kind of hazard can be done by people, by mankind, by human beings. Therefore, we can associate with the industry, energy, leakage of toxic waste, pollution, dam failure, and also about war. Because nowadays, in some part of the world, we have some wars not maybe about the civil strife, and also between the country we will see such kind of wars. Types of hazard. Types of hazard can be geological, water, climate hazard, environmental, and biological. We come to geological one. It can be include earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruption, landslide, dam burst, mine fire. For water, we have flood, tropical cyclone, tornado, hurricane, drought, hailstorm, cloudburst, landslide, heat and cold wave, snow avalanche, sea erosion. For environmental hazard, we have environmental pollution, deforestation, desertification, pest infection. And for biological, we have human animal epidemics, pest attack, weapons of mass destruction, food poisoning. And all of them are, for example, included in the types of hazard. What about vulnerability? Vulnerability, it means such kind of a community or structure, services, geographical area is likely to be damaged or disrupted by the impact of particular hazard. Because maybe after hazard we have the vulnerability. It means most of the condition of our time, maybe of our life, and also what about the construction, and most of the construction structure are also damaged by hazard or disaster. Therefore, after hazard, we can came across with a vulnerability because after such kind of earthquake, maybe flood, maybe war, we can come across all everywhere with the destruction. And vulnerability also can be categorized into two parts, like physical and social economic vulnerability. What about physical one? It includes notion of who and what may be damaged or destroyed by a natural hazard such as earthquake or flood. Here we have again about physical vulnerability, which can be destroyed by natural hazard. It is based on the physical condition of people, elements at risk such as buildings, infrastructure, and also mostly the nature of the hazard. It also related to the technical capability of building and structure to resist the forces acting upon them during a hazard event. What about the formula for disaster risk? Here we have one, for example, point of view. Disaster risk has been presented by Ward in 1999, and disaster risk can be hazard, vulnerability, and manageability. Manageability, it means how we can manage after this kind of, for example, condition after disaster. We should, for example, try to manage ourselves. It should be manageability, the degree to which the community can intervene to manage a hazard in order to reduce its potential impact. We should solve the problem. We have maybe a lot of problem about disaster, and we should manage. We should be able to solve all of the problem and to reduce, for example, the impact of the hazard or disaster. And also disaster are as old as mankind because the first description of disaster and its management comes from mythological Nuh and his ark. From such kind of legend we know that from Nuh, it is our prophet, about his ark, and all the disaster, for example, maybe began while in this methodology was born, and this, for example, period. And similar flood tales are widespread in Greek mythology and Puranas, Mesopotamian stories, and many culture. But all of such kind of natural phenomena are old as a human being. We can also predict that they are too old. Therefore, most of our scientists and researchers try to learn their reasons and their, for example, outcomes. Let's come to the old etymology of this kind of word, like dust, dust bath. Aster, it means a star because the old version of the word belonged to the Greek one. Then it means it came to the French one as we mentioned it, and also to the Italian. It can be like a disaster. And we have, for example, another feature which can give the meaning of bad star, like bad star, you know that it has a negative meaning. Uh, Another definition of the disaster is a, you know that disaster can causes damage, ecological disruption, loss of human life, and also it is a deterioration of our health and health services. And also, you know, it can affect more and more for our community, for our society, because not only for the human's life, loss of human's life, and also the condition of human being can be deteriorated with some reason. And also hazard, it is a phenomena that the potential to cause the disruption of damage to people and their environment. A hazard is a natural event while the disaster is its consequence. Hazard is a perceived natural event which threatens both life and property. When hazard involve element of risk, vulnerabilities, and capacities, they can turn into disasters. Again, we have natural disaster and man-made disaster, as we mentioned it before, but here it is given like another more detailed information about natural disaster. Natural disaster can be meteorological, topographical, and environmental. For man-made disaster, it can be technological, industrial, and warfare. For a natural disaster, pay attention to three columns. In three columns, all the features, all the types are given for you like an example. For meteorological disaster, it can be include flood, tsunami, cyclone, hurricane, typhoon, snow, storm, blizzard, hailstorm. For topographical, it should be volcanic eruption, earthquake, avalanches, landslides, and limnic eruption. For environmental, it should be mostly global warming and ozone depletion, radiation, and also, you know, southern oscillation and solar flare. All of them are included in the natural disaster because no one can do it. It can happen naturally, therefore, it is called natural disaster. What about man-made disaster? Because man-made disaster can will happen through the human's hand because we pay attention again to three columns, which is called technological, industrial, and warfare. For technological, you know that we have a lot of technological devices nowadays, and you can change them. By the way, all the technological, if our technology is improving day by day, maybe we have a lot of conveniences for our life condition, but we have such kind of disaster also because it can belong to the technology. For the industrial, we have chemical spills and also radioactive spills, which can be very harmful for the human life because of the gas fumes, maybe of transportation, maybe from other factories of such kind of smokes also can be very harmful and dangerous for humans' life. And the last one is about war. War, terrorism, internal conflict, civil unrest can be included in war because all of them are made by human people. Therefore, it is called man-made disaster. Disaster management, the body of policy, administrative decision, and operational activities should pertain to various stages of the all disaster at all levels. And you know, disaster management, each person should, for example, know about the disaster and try to prevent, to, for example, inform about it to other because some of the, as we mentioned it above, some of the disaster can be natural, but some of them can be by human being, like man-made disaster, but we should know all information about this type of disaster. What about disaster management? We should pay attention to the given rule, like prevention of danger, reduction of a risk, capacity building, preparedness to deal with any disaster. We should be prepared. If any disaster will happen, we should be prepared for everything. And prompt response to any threatening, assessing the severity, evacuation, and also the last one is rehabilitation and reconstruction. Rehabilitation, mostly it is belong to our health problem, and for reconstruction, you know that after, for example, a lot of disaster, most of our building fall down, and therefore we can reconstruct, rebuild them in order to again build another construction of the building. The Mostly we have technology, such kind of technology, which diseases after man-made disaster. We have also such kind of symptoms, maybe diseases which can widely spread among the world, and also the destruction of weapons, and also such kind of another man-made disaster can be very harmful for our humans' life. Uh, in order to reconstruct, we should pay attention to the, for example, rebuilding of the homes. Again, we have to, for example, in order to know the component of the disaster mitigation, pay attention to the assessment, to the consideration, and consideration itself can be, for example, include history, probability of various intensities, maximum threat, possible secondary hazard. And also risk analysis, it should be included, because if we analyze the risk of the nature, maybe after the disaster, we can know about the probability of hazard of a particular magnitude element of the, for example, damage. We should know about the nature of vulnerability, and also about future time period. And prevention, it should be included here, because activities taken to prevent a natural phenomena, and we should also to prevent people about harmful effect of this hazard. Uh, the disaster, it is such kind of thing which can be every time harmful for our, for example, life. Therefore, you should pay attention while you are in the disaster. And this kind of disaster are always very, very harmful to everyone. And pay attention that every disaster has its own feature, and we should prevent ourselves from every of its speed. Our lesson is over, and goodbye. See you soon.